What the bunny did? You did that?
No, I just personally make.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I'll call you later.
One guy, not long ago.
Yeah.
I knew about that.
Yeah, but she gets highlights in the summer.
Hello.
That's not like really like, you know,
Hello.
when Matt was a girl, I love running too. He does not realize who she is.
Testing, testing, testing. 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 Testing, testing, testing. Can y'all hear in the back of the room? Can you hear it back there? Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Testing, testing, testing. How are we doing in the back of the room? Okay, thank you. My name is Dan White. I'm the water boy that's been working under the coaching direction of Ken Conrad, who some of you may know and most of you probably don't, and the lovely Joyce Brown. And we're here tonight because of their efforts, and a little bit for me, but mostly for them. We have been blessed. You know, originally this event was scheduled for last weekend. And Jesse Coffey, who is our videographer, couldn't make it, but he could make it this weekend. And in trying to rearrange this event, the Manor had booked up tomorrow night. And we were stuck with an extraordinary fish night. At that point in time, I didn't even know Jim Brown was Catholic, honestly. I had no idea. I learned a lot in the last month, believe me. A lot of it I'd rather not know, not about Jim, but just about whatever. But anyway, we're here tonight, and tomorrow we expect to get 6 to 9 inches of snow. So I got to believe the good Lord was shining down on us on this situation. So I want to thank you all I want to thank you personally, and Kenny is grateful, very grateful for the crowd, and most especially Jim and Joyce are grateful for the crowd, and happy you're here, and happy they're here, and Jim will be speaking a little later on.
Not for long.
Not for long. I tell you this, I probably talked to close to 300 people in the last month about, well, the ones that are, I'll just leave it at that. The ones that are here love and respect and like Jim. There is no indifference in the crowd that's here, in my opinion, from what I've seen, and I've been at it pretty much for the last 30 or 40 days. So this is a love gathering. It's a warm gathering, and that's the way it should be. We're not going to have structure tonight, except that we're going to have a meal and a prayer, and then after the meal, we're mainly going to talk and laugh and scratch and do what people do. But one of the things that that I want to talk about is that we keep this in a manner that we were taught in school back in the day. I know today the young people are a lot smarter than we were. I wouldn't make the cut today. They're a lot smarter. But there's some things we learned about sportsmanship and the golden rule and so forth back in the day that I think we learned those today, but I think they bear repeating. And one of the things is that we need to learn to be a gracious, humble winner and loser. And maybe it's more important to be a gracious, humble winner than it is a loser. We kind of understand it when we get whipped. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that if you defeat somebody, if you kick somebody's butt today, they may go take a Charles Atlas course or karate and come back and whip yours 6 months later. So it doesn't make sense to gloat and so forth. And we learned that back in the day. Another thing is, why would we want to create anger in somebody if we really want to persuade them to our point of view? If we want to win somebody over and maybe change their mind a little bit, why would we want to do that? And I guess finally, I know that Jim and I, we had the same principals, the same teachers, the same coaches, and we learned all about the golden rule, do unto others as you would have do unto you. And that was the Christ principle in action. And so I guess my message is that we want to keep it really cool, calm, and civil. And I don't want to be preachy, but and I wouldn't have even said those things except that I've listened to some unbelievable stuff in the last 30 days. And I don't think that's going to happen here, but I believe, and I was advised, that those words were worth putting out there. So, here's the structure of what we're doing. In a couple minutes, maybe a minute, I'm going to introduce Don Stowell, who's a senior minister at Lockland Christian Church. And Don's going to give a pre-meal blessing. Back in the day, in the Catholic Church, we called it grace, but we'll call it a pre-meal blessing. Then we're going to line up and grab the food. The amazing staff here will help anybody that needs help. They will serve us. I mean, it's not going to be all grab your food and have to take care of everything. They'll help you, but we are going to have to go grab the plate and so forth. About 6:30, probably more like 6:45, I'm going to introduce David Kring. David is a professional MC. I'm just an old guy up here, and I will introduce Dave, and Dave in turn will kind of guide the discussion. We've got 8 people that have indicated to me that they would like to say some words on Jim's behalf. I've got a bunch of emails that I've received from people, well wishes. Some are funny, some of them will make you cry. But we'll be reading some of those. Anybody who wants to say something that hasn't advised us already, if you want to put up your hand, Dave will do his best to call on you, and you can comment. You can comment preferably up here because it's a big room. But we're going to do that, and then probably about 7:30, we'll finally let the guest of honor speak and introduce his family. And then Don will finally say another blessing, and we'll head for home before the snow comes. So anyway, Don, where are you? There you are. Don Stowell, with our blessing.
Would you bow with me in prayer? Father, we are thankful for this night, that we can come together as friends and family of Jim Brown to honor him, to remember the years he has served in this community. Father, we're also thankful for the fellowship that we have with one another. I pray it will be a great strength for us tonight as we reminisce, as we laugh, as we just think of the good things that have happened. Father, we're thankful for the food that we're about to eat. We ask that give us strength tonight and help us to enjoy it together. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
This is David. Dave Crane.
I'm Chris.
This is Chris Crane. This is Lynn Jones. This is Dick Spilo. You know Dick.
In the meantime, I'll find somebody to serve our guests of honor, and Mr. Boehner as well. I know you're famous, but that's all right. Okay, everybody. Hope you had enough to eat. Hope it was good. Mine was. It's time now for me to introduce the celebrity MC, and that's David Cranks, right here. Most of you know David or no other. And David is going to direct the dialogue from here to the end. And we've got about 7 or 8 scheduled speakers, people who have suggested they want to talk. If anybody wants to talk, please put up your hand. I've probably got 2 or 3 dozen emails from well-wishers. In between, I might read a few of those. And if Dave runs out of people or things to say himself, I've got 1,000 stories about growing up in Lockland. Some of you are included in those stories, so it's just as well that I don't get back up again. But, David, your turn, dude.
Well, it's great to see so many folks here. We've got family, we've got friends, we've got people that work with Jim, and you know, we certainly filled up this room, and that says a lot about Jim and what people think of him. I first met Jim between 13 and 14 years ago. It was shortly after. Well, in quotation marks, I retired as administrator of Hamilton County. I still have the footprint. And Jim gave me a call, and an associate of mine from the county suggested that he might give me a call and see if I could work in Lockland. Well, I thought about it for a while, and Jim says, hey, it's just till the end of the next term. I'm going to retire at the end of the next term. And, again? Yeah, that was like 13, 14 years later, I was still with Jim. And like many of you, I was still with Jim because I really like being with Jim. You know, I'm, as you can tell from looking at me, I'm long past the normal retirement age. And I was able to spend it with Jim Brown. One of the things I really like, I look at Bob Boehner and a few other people here. You know, Jim has a Reading office at the White Castle, and every morning he and his buddies get together and have the White Castle coffee. And of course, if you're an administrator and you want to talk to the mayor, that's a good place to catch up with him. Now, let me tell you this. I'm not going to give you all the details of what goes on at the White Castle. But let me tell you that if you ever have an undernourished plant, bring it into these guys in the morning. And by the time their conversation is over, you're going to have, well, they're going to be really healthy and grow like crazy. There's a whole lot of fertilizer. All right. I've got a list of 9 people who volunteered to talk about Jim and make a few comments. Actually, it's 10 people, but 9 presentations. And in between, like when people are coming up and going back, I'm going to ask Dan to read one of the emails or letters that we've gotten from people who would like to be here but can't be here for one reason or another. So the first on my list is the duo of Steiny Vandahar and Diane Redden. So if you all would come on up. In the meantime, Dan, do you have a quick one?
Yes. Hi Dan, this is February 19th and this is from Lylinsky. Regarding your emails, notice the celebration for Mayor Brown, which is truly deserving. Having known Jim for many years, he was special to my family. My children all think the best of him. My son Scott, if possible, would like to attend. Scott was coached by Jim and my two daughters were cheerleaders. Yours truly would like to be in attendance. We're in the Sunshine State during March. So sad I won't be able to make it. It was my humble pleasure and honor to serve and work with Jim as a councilman for 10 years. I always felt Jim was doing the best for our beloved village. He was a true friend. Although we are of different political parties, our friendship is always true, and we did work together for the good of the village. Lylinsky.
Thank you very much. A few people in this room may know that I have a semi-famous celebrity brother, Bill Cunningham. He would have liked to have been here tonight, Tim's classmate from Xavier, but he's prepping the Deer Park High School, soon-to-be Ohio championship team, couldn't make it. So I want to read a letter from the OML, Ohio Municipal League, by the Executive Director, Kent Scarrett, that Kent sent to Steiny and I to be presented tonight to Jim, in recognition of the contributions of Mayor Jim Brown. It is my pleasure to write in recognition of the legacy and leadership of Mayor Jim Brown. We honor his many years of service not only to the citizens and businesses of the Village of Lockland, but the Ohio Municipal League, its leadership, and the more than 700 Ohio municipalities and villages that make up our membership. As anyone who's attended an annual League conference would know, over the last several decades, Jim and his wife Joyce were faithful supporters of the League. Jim was very active for decades and served in many different leadership roles. Jim first served his community and state through the service on the Mayor's Association of Ohio by serving on the board of directors and later as president from 1991 to 1992. During this time, Jim also served on the OML board of directors and became its president from 1997 to 1998. Jim served on the league board for over 25 years and was a steady hand when it came to making critical decisions about the organization's future. I'm proud to recognize the significant contributions Mayor Brown has made to the Ohio Municipal League as a strong supporter of municipalities in the association. Mayor Brown has always been a faithful defender of local control and the insistence that the state mind its own business and leave municipalities alone. It has been a pleasure to serve alongside Jim in advocating for Ohio's cities and villages for many years, and his hard work has undoubtedly created a brighter future and set a strong tone for Ohio's municipalities for many years to come. Executive Director Kent Scarrett. However, the Ohio Municipal League meetings I remember may have been a little less dignified. I think 7 years ago was when Joyce and Jim and I met with Steiny, and we were introduced to Schmidt's Sausage House and Black House Shots and Steinhager and Bad Apple, and I remember getting a shuttle over and back, and Bob, what are you looking innocent about? You were right there with us. So we had a great time. We look for many years to come of great more times with Jim and Joyce doing shots at Black House.
Thank you very much. I'm not a big drinker myself. Well, I'm big anyway. And they are famous for their Christmas parties where Jim has, what do you call that thing, Jim? It's like a paddle with... Oh, well, it looks like it is a paddle, all right. And it's got about, what, a dozen shots on it? Well, let's just say I always have my wife Chris with me whenever I go to that party. So I need somebody to drive. All right, the next speaker is Deborah Bray, and while she's making her way up.
Okay, I've got an email here from Colonel Bill Keeler, Vietnam pilot. captain of our 1955 baseball football team. Verbally, Bill told me just last week, the very best trustee custodian of Lockland of all time. He was on, he sent an email, he says, Jim Brown played 1 year of LHS baseball with him. He was an excellent third baseman. He wore number 25 for LHS football. I inherited the number for the 52-54 seasons. It brought me luck. Incidentally, Kurt Herron inherited it from me. Wish Jim well for my family, including my brand new wife, M.E. Bill got married on January the 1st, 80-year-old, married a 75-year-old.
Yeah, let's hear it for the cradle, Robert.
Thanks, David. Thank you, Dan and Jim, for asking me to say a few words this evening. I am truly honored. For those of you who know me, a few words is going to be probably really difficult for me, but we'll try. I've lived in Lockland my whole life, and I'm always proud to say I'm from Lockland. I got involved with Jim Brown and the whole town ticket in the 80s. It was exciting, fun. I believe Jim really cared for the village. The rest is history. I was asked to join the ticket in '86 and was the first woman elected to the village. Here's a quick story about that campaign. So Jim tells me that I've got to get my signs together, okay? And you can use my garage to do that. I said, okay, great. So I get my friend Jeff Griffith, God rest his soul, and we go over to the garage and we work like beavers and we put those signs together. Jim comes back and we're beaming about our success and how we've got everything done and all of our signs are done. And he sees that we used the wood that was cut for his signs. Okay. And and we were so eager to show him what we had done, you know, and Jim just kind of goes, okay, well, that was for my signs, but I'm glad you got your signs ready to go. So that's just one in a million stories and memories I have about Jim. Campaigns were always a lot of fun, nights going door to door, meetings after, and maybe a drink or two. We always had a great time. The Ohio Municipal League, wow. We always had a great time there. And Jim always made sure that we had a good time, but that we always brought back some great opportunities for the village. When you're around Jim, you always have a good time. Now to say, Jim and I always saw eye to eye on everything, well, Jim, we know, right? But as you know, I always respected your opinion and we found a way to work it out. I like to share a quote from Margaret Mead that reflects Jim's success. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Jim, I want to thank you for including me in your life. I thank you for loving Lockland and working your whole life to make it a great place to live. I thank you for all the times when people who were suffering in grief, loss, or need, you came and you helped. That, my friends, is what a real man, a friend, and a mayor is. Thank you.
Well, we're doing all right. Remember, I've got 9 named speakers, plus whoever wants to volunteer to be a speaker. Dan tells me we have to be done with that part of the program by 7:30 or I'm going to get fired. I'm getting pretty good at that. Our next speaker is Glenn Lewis of the class of '52.
Thanks, Dave. Dear Mr. White, that's the first time I heard that since the IRS tried to get a hold of me. It says, unfortunately, my wife and I will be unable to join you on Friday as you and the community recognize Mayor Brown's many years of service to the citizens of the Village of Lockland. Having had the privilege to serve the neighboring city of Reading as a member of council and mayor, I have a full understanding of the sacrifice that comes with such commitment, and Jim's service to his constituents was outstanding, as served many of us as a role model. He was untiring in his efforts to make Lockland the very best it could be, and many of his accomplishments will not be fully appreciated for some time. My wife and I wish Jim and his wife Joyce Godspeed in the future, and be assured Jim is in our prayers. Earl J. Schmidt, March 22nd.
Glenn Lewis, class of 52. I'm going to change up here and not talk about what Jim has done in office, but I knew Jim as a youngster. We were together from the first grade right on through. Jim played football, played end, did a magnificent job. Baseball, basketball, trumpet. Everybody liked Jim very much. He was quiet, reserved. But things changed, didn't they? That's right. Isn't that right, Jim?
That's right. That's right.
That's right. I'll lie and you'll swear to it. I left at 18, and upon my return years later, Mom and Dad said, you know, Jim Brown came to our house when he was campaigning. And he came to the door and said, Margaret, Bill, I know you're Republicans, but let me know if there's anything I can do for you. I really thought a lot of Jim for that. Not many people are like him. Thank you.
I say amen to that. Not many people are like him. All right, our next speaker is the Honorable Wayne Poe. And Dan, I think we need a long letter because Wayne is way back there.
Okay. Well, Lyle Inskeep was relentless, and Lyle, by the way, is a very, very private guy. He's a hard guy to communicate with because he's so private. But he is so into this event. He says, thanks for the info on the special and deserving event. As previously mentioned, we were in Florida the month of March. Sadly can't make it. Yours truly has the highest regard for Jim. It was an honor to serve as councilman under his leadership. Jim mentioned many times to me to put a D before my name. Nevertheless, each time yours truly ran for office, was the top vote getter in the council race without the D and with the R. Regardless, the main focus was to work together for the good of our beloved Lockland. So Dan, again, thanks for the celebration for a deserving gentleman. Thanks for keeping me in the loop. Miss you very much. Please keep me apprised. Lyle Inskeep.
Jim, you must be really proud right now. You've got a bunch of people that love you, buddy. Since I have had the privilege to be associated with Mayor Jim Brown, he has always shown me how much he cares about the Lockland citizens. He has always tried to do what he believes is best for this beloved community. Jim has planted hundreds of trees, throughout which helped to beautify our neighborhoods with magnificent foliage. This spring, when our trees are in bloom, remember his insight which will last for many generations. Whenever one of our citizens passed away, Jim would always try to show his respects at the funeral home, showing his love and concern for the family. At Christmas time, Jim continued the live crib dedication. He also continued the baskets of food for those in need. When we lost so many jobs that went overseas, unlike others, Jim went to work. With the help of the village administrator, David Krings, and his administration, they were able to secure government grants to remove those derelict factories and clean up those sites. Today, all of those sites are clean and ready for the next generation of jobs. Lockland has secured more greenfield grants than any other community in Ohio. Jim always knew Lockland would only be as good as its employees. The police, fire, service, administrative offices, personnel had to be the best possible employee at each position. The mayor made every effort to get to know each worker and to make the whole workplace a place where they enjoyed being a part of. We cannot talk about Jim without including Joyce, his dear, wonderful helper, in so many parts of his job. She is everywhere with that warm, cheerful, helping hand. Now Jim, as you know, when he talked about doing something, we could count on him to make every effort to make it happen. He did not make empty campaign promises. Mayor Brown has a quality called integrity, a quality sorely missing in the world today. If others could emulate Jim Brown, our country would be a better place. God bless Jim Brown, and God bless America.
And the next fellow will get up here pretty quickly. I'm pleased to introduce Tim Burke, who is the attorney for, has been for 30 years and is the attorney for the Village of Lockland. I first got to know Tim and his law firm back when I worked with the county, and his firm was suing the county. And I remember I had to give a deposition in the same conference room that I fairly regularly meet with Tim or have met with Tim. Let me tell you, it's a heck of a lot more pleasant being on the same side. Tim, you have something to say about the 30 years you spent with Lockland? 36?
36, as he is reminding me. In 1978, I was a young punk lawyer who thought I was really qualified to be a member of the United States Congress. Jim thought that was a good idea too, and actually had me out to Lockland several times trying to get me a few votes. We got crushed. He felt sorry for me, and when he became mayor, he gave me a one-year contract to be the law director of the village. And then he gave me 35 more one-year contracts. I think I topped Leo DeRocher in one-year contracts. Because I was his lawyer, I know a lot of stories, but I can't tell them because I'd be breaching the attorney-client privilege. A couple of speakers have talked about how Jim fought to keep jobs and to create jobs in Lockland. And one quick story I can tell you is the paper company. The federal government had that great program called Urban Development Action Grants. And the paper company said, we're going to modernize, we're going to buy this big new piece of equipment, we need an Urban Development Action Grant. I think we got them $250,000 to buy this big piece of equipment. Metzenbaum, a good Democrat, right? The paper company closed down anyway, and while the grant was a loan that they had to pay back to Lockland, our mortgage, in essence, was on that piece of equipment. Except the paper company decided they were going to sell the piece of equipment, we think, to China. And Jim said, go get a court order to stop them from taking that piece of equipment out. I didn't know that we could get a court order quickly enough to do that. But Jim knew the solution. He had the police department surround that paper. And this is an absolutely true story. The cops surrounded that paper mill until we were able to get the court order. And until we were able to get a court order that said they had the right to check to the Village of Lockland for almost $200,000. That's the action mayor here. That's the leader for this village that he loves so much. And if you think about what the folks from Evendale had to say and what they offered from the Municipal League and the Mayor's Conference, think about that. 700 some municipalities in the state of Ohio, and they picked this guy to be their president. That's a leader. It's been a great privilege to work with Jim. Thank you.
I got one that's not too quick, but I need to do this. Y'all familiar with this Lockland book? Have you seen this? I got an email just in the last couple of days from John Campbell, the author, who's a really kind of a closeted kind of a guy. I've never met him. We haven't even talked on the phone. I think we did once, but anyway, he's writing another book. It didn't dawn on me until recently that Jim is barely mentioned in this book. The longest tenured mayor in the history of Lockland, story upon stories, he's barely mentioned in the book, as are a couple of other people. Example, Reverend John Rawlings, Mr. Les Wilson, former sports writer, probably responsible for 4 dozen or more of us getting NCAA athletic scholarships and so. But anyway, so John wrote and he says, I'm writing a new book, you want to be in the loop, da-da-da-da-da, and do you have any ideas? So I wrote back and I said, oh yes, John, keep us apprised. John, if you were looking for next book material opportunities, following our 3 names, which in my humble opinion deserve considerable kudos and recognition, along with at least 1 photo, they are James T. Brown, longest tenured mayor of Lockland. If interested, I may be able to assist, and I went on to say that there's a lot of guys in the 80 area, just about 80, or in the 80s, with a lot of stories and a lot of memories, and maybe you ought to interview some of these guys before it's too late. So I think that's worth passing on. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Mayor Brown gets his due in John's next book.
I realize you can't all see it, but on the cover of this book is a picture of the bridge where friends meet between Reading and Lockland. And then there's a sign, 2-sided sign, welcoming people to both communities and referring to the friendship between the 2 communities. Jim fought for years and has finally succeeded in getting that sign replaced. It was gone for, I don't know, a decade or more. He did it for working with his colleagues and friends from Reading. One of them is a fellow named Bob Manor. Bob's a great guy, and as I mentioned, he's one of the constant advisors to Jim Brown at the Reading White Castle.
That's why I lost the election.
No, I'm Bob Boehner. I'm the oldest of the Boehner family, and I'm definitely not one of Jim's advisors. As far as I know, some of the White Castle guys are here. The only thing that's being talked about, as Dave's talked about, BS, is when you and Jim go off to the other table and talk and no one knows what you're talking about. It happens a lot too, yeah. But it's interesting you mentioned that sign because Jim brought that sign up to me a couple years ago. Last year I had to go to city council for some property up on Hill Street where my family, my cousins own a lot of property. I was going to go talk and I said, Jim, I'll bring it up, but why don't you come to council meeting? However, I don't want you talking to the council. Let me do the talking. Because at the time, it was about, I already got to go to Tommy Harsh at S&T Signs to get a bid, and it was going to be about somewhere around $1,300, maybe $1,500 per community for a sign. And my idea, if Reading wasn't going to pay for it, is let's do a fundraiser. I'll put up the first $100. There's other 13 you guys up there. All we need is another couple more people to put up $100. And lo and behold, Mr. Gertz Restaurant, we could pass, they passed an ordinance the next week. Got that done. I kind of shamed him into it. Unfortunately, the lights aren't working. And I'll tell you a story about that in a couple of fish I did. But Jim is a longtime family friend. He knew my mom and dad. I probably knew him when I was in grade school. I used to tell people I knew him when he worked for a living. He wasn't a bad softball player from I heard, but that's another story. My mother grew up in Lockland. I lived in Lockland the first years when I was married, but I don't have a lot of stories about Lockland. I spent 26 years in the city of Reading involved in politics, and I see Doug stand out there. Doug and I were good friends, even though we're on opposite sides of the aisle. Doug and I worked together very well, as well as Earl Schmidt and Frank Carnevale. But going back to Jim again, he brought up the fact about we had a little fundraiser back in '99. I was running against Earl for mayor, and I brought my famous brother into town to do a fundraiser. And Jim kind of sneaked in the back door, and John First thing he said, well, there's my favorite Democrat. You stay up there, Mayor Brown, stand up. Of course, Jim was totally embarrassed. But a lot of our family calls Jim their favorite Democrat. We don't realize most of our family, if not all our families, are Republicans, but we all know Jim. We've known Jim for years. We knew him before he's involved in politics. But the other stories that I got, I probably couldn't tell. I was telling Tim Burke, I couldn't really tell him this venue. But Jim's a great guy. He's got more BS than everybody in this room put together. He tells me stuff that I just cannot believe, and I just ignore it. I can't even tell my wife because she couldn't believe this guy. She said, you got to go there and tell some of those stories. I said, I can't say those stories. But one thing I will close, though, Jim, is I don't care what it takes or what it costs me or what I got to do. I will get the lights and that sign lit. I don't care how I do it, but I'm going to get it done. I promise you.
All right, our next speaker is also in the back of the room, so pick a long one here, Dan. We've got longtime treasurer of the Village of Lockland, an excellent person to work with, one that I've had frequent contact with on some of the committees that we still have in Lockland. So if Jim Lothian would come on up, and we'll have a quick reading here.
Okay, this one is maybe the most important in my view. This is from Kenny Conrad, without whom we wouldn't be here today. And this was written today. I had to twist his arm. He's such an understated, humble guy. Hi, Jim. Sorry I could not be there for your tribute. There is no one more deserving than you to be recognized for the job you have done for the city of Lockland. You have always had my respect for you and the way you have done your job. On this day, you are in my thoughts and prayers. Blessed to you and yours. God bless, Kenny.
I see. Well, smile for us, Jim. That's good. You're doing a great job. And what that means is Jim likes you too. Okay, our next speaker is who? Charles Bretz. Well, that worked out pretty well.
Have a couple quick ones here. From Barb Cooper. I'm busy with the Eagles. Sorry, Jim. Love Jim. Smile on his face no matter what was going on. That's Barb Cooper. From Russ and Eve Wolf. Will not be able to attend because I run the fish bake at St. Peter and Paul in Reading. Our hours are the same as this event. Please extend to Jim me and my wife's reason for not attending, and also pass on blessings and prayers for Jim especially in the entire event. Russ and Eve Wolf.
Thank you, Dave. A second lawyer speaking on behalf of Jim. What's that say about him? I grew up in Lockland, 410 North Cooper, and for part of that time I lived right across the street from Jim. Jim lived at 409 North Cooper. I don't remember a lot about that time because I was on my way to college and then left Lockland for a period of time. But what I do remember was New Year's Eve on North Cooper, and Jim had a thing he enjoyed doing of taking a shotgun out in the backyard and firing it off at midnight. As you might expect, this put some of the neighbors a little bit on edge. I returned to Lockland some 15 years later, and I too got involved in politics. I'd been in politics all my, well, I joined with Jim to run for elected office. And then for a good period of that time, after the village, or after the city reverted to village status, under Tim, I was the prosecutor of the mayor's court. And that's where Jim and I really got to know one another. And because I worked hand in hand with him and the police department and so forth. And I can tell you that although Jim is not educated as a judge or a lawyer, who've been in many courts, and I think Tim can can second this. Jim had an instinct in terms of how to fairly run and administer justice as a magistrate of the mayor's court. And I saw it time after time. And of course, many of the people that came before him were people that he knew, that he lived with and so forth. And he instinctively knew how to administer justice. The only time I ever found him challenged, though, was usually in January of every year. He would always have to be, or frequently be, confronted with having to adjudicate a disorderly conduct charge that emanated from the folks leaving Vila's place at about 2 a.m. in the morning and spying the live nativity scene across the street. My most recent experience with Jim was about 1.5 years ago, and when I remarried for the 3rd time. And Jim was the one that administered this ceremony. He was the one who officiated. And my wife and I were married in front of Jim on the 2nd floor of the town hall and in the council chambers. And I can tell you, it was as dignified and sensitive a service that I've ever witnessed. And it's to my mind, it's indicative of the kind of man that he has been. That he's down to earth, and he instinctively knows what to do. Jim, I'm truly honored to be here tonight and asked to speak on your behalf. Thanks.
Well, speaking of Jim's proclivity to marrying people, one of those other duties as assigned as village administrator is that I'm just down the hall a little bit from Jim, and he does the ceremonies in the council room. Frequently, there aren't enough people there to have witnesses. So I hear, I don't want to use the word beller, but I am summoned to be a witness, to swear that 2 people who I've never met are freely getting married. And you know, I did that on a regular basis. I thought if it was good enough for Jim, it was good enough for me. Okay, before I have Reverend Stoll come up for some comments, I want to open it up to all of you. Those of you who have not had an opportunity to get on the agenda, here's an opportunity for you. Come on up.
For the pièce de résistance. You ready for this, Your Honor? I'm Don Hinkin, and I'm honored to say that I'm one of Jim's 3 fantastic son-in-laws. The reason I say that is because all 3 of his daughters have been married to the same person for a minimum of 35 years. Susan over here, she puts up with me. And we have Laura, his youngest daughter, and her husband Jerry, and his oldest daughter Sharon, and John McCormick are vacationing with family in Florida, so they couldn't be here today. As you can imagine, in that amount of time, we've been through a lot of festive moments with Jim. Between the fundraisers, the family get-togethers, and the trips to Hofbrauhaus. One of my personal favorites. And very fortunate to say that you can imagine after all that amount of time that there's many of those occasions, and luckily to say, we made it home unscathed every time. Barely. So I learned a lot from Jim over the years. You can imagine, almost 40 years. I think probably one of my favorites, and to me that I learned from him was when you have an entire family over for Christmas or something like that, I found out how to take up the whole couch. with everybody there. I took that with me. I took that home with me. So anyway, I just want to say that it's been great to have Jim as a father-in-law, and appreciated every minute that we spent with him. And in closing, just one thing I want to say, Mayor. Prost.
Well, I too am of German heritage, and I've liked Spaten, which you introduced me to, Jim. And one of the things that's I'm going to remember forever is that, given the German heritage, Jim and I are both fond of eating Limburger cheese sandwiches. Oh. Yum. Is that people saying yum? Well, we would go out on a fairly regular basis to have these sandwiches at what used to be the Boehner's saloon, and you know, we would invite people to go with us, and you know, that never happened. But anyway, Jim, I hope you have lots of Limburger in the house and have it for many years to come.
There's not any.
All right, anyone else have a few words to say? Going? Going?
Yes, Roger.
All right, Roger.
Jim, I'd like to thank you for all the work you've done. You've really been very supportive of myself and all my father and mother, and this is what you did for the city. Blessings and prayers and love to you. God bless. Thank you.
In short, but really expressed the sentiments that most all of us have. Thank you, Jim.
I've got a story.
All right. Is it a good story?
I don't know. What happened? I'll let the crowd decide. Back in 1955, Lockland High School fortunately had a state championship baseball team. That was Class B at the time, we called it. We won the state championship, and Elder won this Class A championship. There was a lot of baseball talent in Greater Cincinnati at the time. There always has been. We were probably the third best team in the state. We had competitors in what was the MVIL at the time. Reading had Claude Osteen as a pitcher then. And our little 125-pound Gene Troy beat Osteen in the semifinals. Reading was much more talented and much deeper. And Green Hills had a pitcher named Dick Fox and a slugger named Joe Cushing. So, to be honest, we were probably third best, although we were good. But anyway, we won the championship and we're all proud. And there was a picture taken at Ohio State Stadium. It was kind of iconic, and it hung around Lockland for quite a few years in the hall of that team. Well, 50 years later, in 2005, we all had a gathering, a 50th reunion of that team over in Deer Park at a not so nice place, frankly. I remember going back to the bathroom and they didn't even have a seat on the toilet for example. But anyway, I want to get to Jim. And the thing about it was, Jim was the mayor, he was busy, but Jim and his team went to the trouble to grab that photograph, individualize each of us from that photo, send us a photo, a certificate, and a letter of congratulations. This is the mayor of Lockland. And I don't know, I still have that along with a letter that I got from G.W. Bush, Papa Bush, once upon a time, for service done for him. But I never forgot that, and I thought it reflected the kind of guy that he was and is to this point. And I looked at that picture, thinking about that. I looked at it just this past week, and I looked through there, and I thought, you know what, there we are. There's the team. They're all Protestants, except Dan Betzel and I. They're all Protestants, they're not Catholic. And they're probably all Republicans, as I look at them. I know them well. They certainly are now, whether they were then or not. But that's not the point, and it wasn't the point with Jim. He treated everybody the same, and it was warm and gracious and kind, and never too busy to do the right thing. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Jim.
All right, do we have anyone else? Is the Spirit moving you? Well, we do have a person in attendance. I know the Spirit moves. Reverend Stoll, come on up.
Well, I was told that tonight was going to be a time to roast Jim, and I have found nobody to do that. However, I'm not here to disappoint or disobey, so hold on to your seat. I first want to say that Jim has many friends. It's pretty obvious from here. Jim can be funny, he's got a great sense of humor, very open, very honest. But Jim holds one secret that nobody knows but me. And I refuse to divulge that secret so that I would not embarrass you. So I'd like you to raise your water glasses, if you will, at this moment. And let's make a toast to my fellow Republican, Jim Brown. Oops. So I have to bring Joyce into this too, because, I mean, they're kind of married. They've been married for many years. And over time, they shared all kinds of activities and adventures. But one day, they were playing cards. And Joyce looked at Jim and said, "Now, don't get mad at me. I know we've been married a long time, but I just cannot think of your name. I've thought and I've thought, but I can't remember it. Please tell me what your name is." And Jim just glared at her. He glared at her, he stared at her, and finally he said, "How soon do you need to know?" Jim often referred to his age. In fact, as long as I've known him, about 18 years now, he would often tell me how old he was. And, you know, like I was going to feel sorry for him or something, and I didn't, because I think he did an amazing job as he got older. But as he neared his 80s, he would decide to reveal how old he really was. And he would say to me, a 30-year mortgage sounded like a pretty clever scam. And Joyce said to him one day, "Let's go over to the couch and snuggle." And he said, "Pick one, I can't do both." How about the time that your friends complimented on your new alligator shoes and you were barefoot? Jim knew he was a grown-up, though, because he would groan every time he got up. Still do. He told me once his back goes out more than he does. And you sing to elevator music still, right? Good, good, good. One time he said that people would just get in the habit of calling him at 7 o'clock and ask him if he was still awake. But Jim's absent-mindedness has grown worse over the years of his marriage, and Joyce told me that it started out in small ways. First, he'd forget names, and then he'd forget faces, and then he'd forget to zip up, and now he forgets to zip down. Jim, truly, you're a good man. You are a good man. I think you've done a lot for this community. You know what's important in life. You know who your friends are. You just stick close to them. You're very faithful, loyal to them. I'm glad to have known you for all these many years. The time that you've gotten me involved in the community in various ways. You've trusted me to do certain things. You've visited our church on many, many occasions. By the way, you missed this past Sunday. But you'll send the check. Y'all heard that, right? Well, will give you a statement too. But I want to wish you the very best, as the Bible talks about everything that's come together and is pressed down and multiplied. That's what I want for you. And may God touch your heart in ways that you could never think of yourself. Blessings to you.
Well, Reverend Knight, it's no wonder why your church is so prominent in Lockland. That's probably the best sermon I've heard ever. All right, Dan, you have anything more here?
I got a few quick ones here, Dave.
This is from Marion Graff Wingard. They're in Florida. They've become great friends of ours. They're great friends of ours. Marion was in the class of '57. And she and two other women directed me in our reunion last year. They were my bosses. But she writes, "Sounds as if you're busy, Dan, with the Jim Brown get-together. Hope it goes well. Jim was hands down the best ever for Lockland and all residents." And I got another very quick one here from George and Georgette Mead. "Dan would love to come, but we're too far away. Please offer Jim our best. We love him. George and Georgette Mead." And then I got another one here from Ray Harper, March the 18th. "Sincerely thank you for the invite. We hope there's a great turnout. We'll be praying for Jim in the event. We have a lot on our plate and won't be able to attend, probably out of town. Blessings to Jim and family. Thanks again, Ray Harper."
All right. Well, we said we had to get through with this section by 7:30, and looks like we've made it. But now is a real highlight of the evening, and that is a few comments by the Honorable Jim Brown.
Thanks, Dave. I'm probably going to be redundant tonight, but I can't help it. I want to thank a special thanks to Dan White and his wife. They put together that invitation with the Lockland colors on the school and Lockland colors of Lockland when I was mayor. Anyway, I know what a job it was, and I appreciate that very much. I'm truly humbled and honored tonight to be here, and I appreciate it very much. I'm going to do a little history. My family moved to Lockland when I was 4 years old. And I was lucky to grow up in Lockland while it was a booming town. We had factories, 3 car dealers, 5 restaurants, and every storefront was full. In the late 40s and early 50s, not many people had cars in Lockland. So they had to walk up on Friday and Saturday night and shop. Well, they had everything in Lockland that you could possibly need. Shoe stores, jewelry stores, you name it, they had it. Ice cream shops, I remember that well. In 1960, the town slowly started to die. When Tri-County opened, the factories began closing, as did the stores. Also, the Lockland split, which tore our town in half, was finished. When I got to be about 23 or 24 years old, I tried to get involved in politics. My mom was a Republican. My dad was a Roosevelt Democrat. I went to the Republicans first and asked them about getting involved. They said they'd get back to me. Never had happened. After a year, Carl Norton asked me to join the Democrats, which I did. After I was elected, Jefferson Smurfett closed. And with Yvonne Kovac and council, the late Jerry Raby, Debbie Bray, the late Jim Johnson, and Bob Brown, we got the first Brownfield grant in the state of Ohio. I'll tell you a little story about, at that time, Nancy Hollister was the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio. And I'd been to Marietta the year before for a 200-year celebration. And she gave me a little American flag and a Marietta flag. When she come to Lockland to look at the site, I rolled that Marietta flag up my sleeve. And when she walked up that ramp, I unfurled that flag and waved it, and she got the biggest kick out of that. And 1 week later, we had $1 million. I was blessed with great administrators. Bill Mount, Jerry Thaman, Yvonne Kovac, and last but not least, for the last 13 years, Dave Krings. Dave, some of the council members was complaining about his salary being too high. Well, about a month after he come on board, we went to Norwood to try to get a $500,000 grant. We went into this room, and there was 12 people sitting there. And Dave said, I give my little speech about 3 minutes, and he got up and made a nice presentation. We walked outside, and Dave said, you know, Jim, I hired 7 of them when I worked for the county. 1 week later, we had $500,000. That paid his salary 3.5 or 4 years. So I think it was worth it.
More than that, Jim.
Yeah. 34 years ago, we started the Tree City Awards to try to get that. It took us 3 years, but we got it. We're in our 31st year. We're going to get that this year. Of the 55 jurisdictions in the Tree City around this area, we're in the top 10. And from what I understand, I think the new administration may not continue it. But I hope they do. We had our 150th celebration in 1999, and I was approached by Bird and Company about a clock for the celebration, and they told me it cost about $80,000. Well, I went from factory to factory and business to business, and I raised $80,000, and that clock sits there today with no cost to the village. We also started the Veterans Memorial. We couldn't raise quite that much money, but we raised enough to partially finish it. What we got done so far looks good. If someone has $150,000 laying around, I'd like to finish the job. Roger.
Pass around there, please.
And last, I want everybody to know that we, with the help of the state of Ohio and the factories, all the factories in Lockland were tore down at no cost to the village. I hope I didn't bore you with this, but it's something I'm proud of. I'm grateful to have you all here tonight. I'm going to end this speech by how I ended my second acceptance speech. I love Lockland. Couple things that I want to do now. First of all, I'd like to have all my family members and my wife Joyce please stand up. And the last thing is, without all his help and all his hard work, this would have never happened tonight. And I'm so grateful. I really appreciate it. I'd like to ask Dan White to step up. Dan. First of all, I want to mention that Dan's dad was a policeman in Lockland for probably 25 or 30 years. And from the time I was 12 years old till I was 18, he chased me all over Lockland. But he was a people's cop. When he caught me, he would take me home and tell my dad. That's when I got to hell, when I told my dad. Anyway, Dan, I want to give you this as a token of our appreciation for your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. And my earlier comments that we were going to be in a group which is not only capable of, but exhibits unconditional love regularly. The last month or so of combing through people and ending up with this amazing group been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And you know, I just knew it was right. You know, this guy, Jim Brown, could not have endured the number of years that he did in this job, which was almost 3 times his next closest rival in terms of tenure. There's no way a human being could endure the leadership challenge. When you become a leader, you're automatically a target. I don't care whether you're leading a family or what, but you can't do it for that long, and especially that well, if you're doing it selfishly. And my gut feeling, even though I was away from Lockland for many, many years, I would hear what was going on, and I knew Jim somewhat, but the most unselfish leader, I'll even forget the word politician, the most unselfish leader. I've had some great football coaches, some great people I've known, but I honestly believe that Jim is the most unselfish. Forget about what he did, which was huge, but the most selfless and unselfish person that's ever had a leadership role as far as I know. And I can't think of anything more to say than that, and that's what it's all about. Thank you, Jim.
Hey, Dan, show them what's
Oh, yeah.
The key to the city.
Looks like the key to the city. All right. Thank you so much. I could have used that back in the days when you had jail cells.
All right, well, thank you for a great evening. And to top the evening off, Reverend Stowe, would you come back up and send us on our way before the snow starts?
Would you stand with me, please? God, we are thankful for this night. What a great night it's been to be able to share in the memories that we can hold on to, the treasures that really mean a whole lot to us about Jim's life. And Father, we pray for Jim as he goes through this physical turmoil. We pray that he continues to have that good heart and that he continues to share. Father, may we express our joy of our friendship with him continually. Watch over us as a community, because there are a lot of things that we can remember in the past that we can take into the future. Watch over all of us tonight. As we go from this place, may we be safe as we head to our homes. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, thank you all. Safe travels.